Hello. We're going to talk about the assignment for writing to inform. Writing to inform is when you are presenting facts clearly, logically, and in an unbiased way. For example, this sentence informs the reader. Hybrid cars combine petrol and electricity to create a car that uses both types of fuel. Whereas this sentence describes the car. The sleek silver hybrid car's engine purred as she turned the key in the ignition. Here's a description about how to make tea. Boiling water gently infuses the dried tea leaves in the tea bag, and creamy, fresh milk can be added to change the taste. If we want to rewrite this sentence so that it informs the reader about how to make tea, instead we would say, tea is made by adding dried leaves to boiling water, and the taste can be changed by adding milk. When writing to inform, and anytime you write, you should remember to consider your audience. Think about who is likely to be reading the text and what they will know about the subject. So let's read this informative text about church bells ringing and then answer the following questions. A person does not need to be physically strong to ring a church bell. The bell is attached to a wheel, and when the rope is pulled, it spins 360 degrees and is stopped at the balance point. Why are inverted commas used on the term balance point? Those quotation marks are actually called scare quotes. Quotation marks around single words can occasionally be used for emphasis, but only when quoting a word or term someone else used. Usually this implies that the author doesn't agree with the use of the term. It can also be used to emphasize a word that needs clarity. So in this case, the assumption is that not everybody would understand what a balance point is, and then the author would go on to clarify what a balance point is. So for this assignment, audience, you think about the audience, and that would be your instructor, me, and your classmates. Think about what the audience needs to know and what they may already know. For example, if you write about the United States, there are some things you can reasonably assume that people know. Things like there are 50 states. George Washington was our first president. Things like that. If you deep dive into a historical event, you'll want to summarize and then go into detail. So say, for example, you were going to do some deep dive into the Boston Tea Party. People know a lot of cursory information about it, but they may not know nitty-gritty details. So pick and choose since we don't have a lot of room in the essay. Remember, concise is key. The essay has a minimum to achieve, but it also has a maximum. Main ideas. So think about your topic, direction, and ideas. These will help you outline and create your paper. Your topic, what specifically are you going to write about? Direction, which way are you going to write about your paper? You aren't arguing a side, but you can present something positively or negatively. Ideas, what are some points you want to make in your writing? These will build your paragraphs. And then you should also have done enough reading to know whether or not your points are realistic, so make sure you're doing a little advanced research before you put everything down on paper. Once you have laid these out, you're ready to move on to outlining. So I would start with writing out topic, direction, and ideas, and then begin your outline. You can find outlining in your textbook on page 25. Next, you want to move into your thesis. Your thesis should emphasize your topic or subject and indicate the direction you'll take your paper and your reasons. So from here on out, I'm going to use a completely ridiculous topic to avoid discouraging anybody from using their real topic. So this is made up and it's just nonsense. So I'm saying, for my thesis, the controversial Unicorn Protection Act was necessary to ensure that unicorns remained an endangered species, did not become extinct, and were given the opportunity to repopulate internationally. So some things you can tell from my thesis. You can tell that I'm going to write about the Unicorn Protection Act. You can tell that I believe the issue is controversial but necessary. You can tell that it will focus on unicorns remaining an endangered species, avoiding extinction, and repopulating. And the focus will be international. It will not be confined to one country. The thesis is not arguing a point, and it's focused. Next, you would move into your opening paragraph. So your thesis should be the last sentence of your opening paragraph. As you develop as a writer, eventually you can move the thesis around, but for our purposes, we'll keep it as the last sentence. So our opening sentence, this is your interest catcher, your hook, or your lead. This is the line that opens your paper and it makes the reader want to read the rest of your paper. So you can use the shocking fact. You can also open with something interesting that others may not know to draw in the reader. Next, you want to go into supporting sentences. You want to give the reader a bit more background. You want to save your research material for later in the paper. This should be your words giving the reader some general background on your paper topic. And again, your thesis sentence, place it as the last sentence in the first paragraph. Again, as you progress in other writing courses and as you do more writing, your thesis placement may vary, but for our purposes, we're going to keep that as the last sentence. So let's take a look at my nonsense topic. My paper is titled A World with No Glitter. And remember too to give your paper a title. The world needs unicorns. However, a few years ago, these majestic creatures were nearly extinct. So right there, you know what animal I'm going to talk about. You know that they're beautiful and that they were nearly wiped out. Of course, they never existed, but again, nonsense topic. Unicorns were cruelly hunted for their horns and bred for their glitter-making capabilities with little regard to how it was hurting the unicorn population. While some members of the United Nations did not want to enact and enforce the Unicorn Protection Act, ultimately, the United States pushing the act, it was passed. The controversial Unicorn Protection Act was necessary to ensure that unicorns remained an endangered species, did not become extinct, and were given the opportunity to repopulate internationally. So then you want to move into your points and start making those. A lot of people in high school learn a 5-paragraph essay and think that they're required to have 3 points in their essay. You're really not. For these essays too, our maximum word count is 750 words, so you really can't make a whole lot of in-depth points, so it's fine to focus on 1 or 2. However, your paragraph structure should be that each paragraph should be related to your main topic. Each paragraph should only have information about one idea. If the topic changes, it's time for a new paragraph. So, paragraph building. We want to have a transition. We want a topic sentence. We want to make a point with our own words, use support, elaborate on that point with our own words, and if necessary, offer additional support. Then we want to wrap up that paragraph. So, here we see a paragraph that builds into our main topic. We'll say the most important reason the Unicorn Protection Act, it's spelled out with the abbreviation in parentheses, so now I'm free to say UPA throughout the rest of the paper, was put into place because of how many unicorns had been lost in the last 10 years. According to Crystal Glittersocks, the world's leading unicorn researcher, over the last 10 years, the unicorn population went from over 1 million to less than 500,000. With nearly a 50% reduction in the unicorn population, the world could not continue to ignore the plight of the unicorn. Fortunately, the UPA prevented unicorns from becoming extinct. Each paragraph in your paper should be similarly structured. There's no right number of paragraphs. Also, another note on paragraph structure. If you're looking at your paper and you've got huge blocks of text that are like a half a page or a full page, you really need to stop and edit because chances are you need to break that into adequate paragraphs. So now we'll jump to the conclusion. Your conclusion should reinforce your main points. It should restate your thesis, but you do not cut and paste your thesis. Sum up and wrap up your paper, and this is not the place to bring in research material or talk about any new ideas or information in the conclusion. So if you haven't already talked about it, this isn't the place to do that. So here we'll conclude my nonsense paragraph, or my nonsense topic. The plight of the unicorn had been ignored worldwide until these beautiful creatures were nearly extinct. With help from the United Nations and the passing of the controversial but crucial Unicorn Protection Act, unicorns are now listed as an endangered species and able to flourish on preservations throughout the world. Thanks to the world making these animals a priority, the world will always have glitter. So here, my main points from my made-up essay have been reinforced. My thesis has been restated, and then I close it out with a line that pretty much sums up the whole paper. So it's catchy and it just kind of wraps it all together nicely. If you can't come up with something that completely sums up the whole paper, don't spend hours worrying about it. Just do your best to try to do a little wrap-up line to really pack a powerful punch right at the end. So finally, some other pointers. You want to make sure that you're using transitions. Use words which will help you move smoothly, sorry for the typo, from one idea in your essay to the next idea. So some examples: first, another, most important, for example, on the other hand, etc. One quick note though, you don't want to label every paragraph first, second, thirdly. It just gets very repetitive and hard to follow, frankly. Also, when you transition, think of it as you're driving a car. And without a transition, you're essentially slamming your brakes on and then going in a different direction completely. So we're reading the paper and then all of a sudden we're stopped very hard, go in a totally different direction, and we need the transition to do a smooth stop and to signal a turn. So think of that as your turn signal. Like, hey, we were talking about this, but here's a transition, and now we're going to move into a different topic. You also need to make sure you're using third person. Third person does not have yourself in the paper, so there's no I, me, us, we, and also avoid talking to you. You need to do this, you need to do that, you're this, you're that. You don't want to talk to this made up you person. Also, spell out contractions. Contractions are, there's a couple listed here. Don't should be do not. Your should be you are, and so on. If you have questions on contractions, you can do that as part of your homework, or a quick Google search will give you lists of how to spell those out. Again, look at any huge blocks of text and break them into paragraphs. Try to edit out overused phrases like today's society, in today's society. See if you can avoid that. And then finally, integrate your sources. Use the MLA video if you need some help. But remember, sources should be sandwiched in between your own words. So they shouldn't open your paragraph and they shouldn't close your paragraph. If you have questions, there are lots of videos and resources on my website as well as through the school. If you have questions, feel free to get in touch. Happy writing!